Hi, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I wanted to just share with you something that's sort of happened in the last few days. I have a thing that I've been sharing with some students and some clients that I think I want to just put out publicly now and just present to show you what's going on, what I've got. Because I think it's interesting and I think it's very useful and it's kind of exciting. It's called the writer workflow, and it's an evolutionary thing. It's something that has been developing unbeknownst to me for the last you know many years, and I want to explain a little bit about what it is. I want to show it to you, and what it is and how you can use it, and how I'm going to present it over time. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to actually make it available to people, but I'm going to figure that out soon. But I want to introduce it. I want to show you what it is, the writer workflow. But let me tell you a little bit about the origin of it first. As I said, it's something that's been emerging from my own process for I think a number of years. And what happened was about a year and a half ago, I realized as I got more and more people working with me simultaneously that I began to see that there was a pattern emerging. I was having people do the same basic steps. Everyone came into the process different places, so they were doing different steps. But over time, as people repeated classes and did private consulting and the same tools that I was using, the same development processes that I've been using, I kept repeating over and over and over. And I noticed that it was in a certain order and that they kind of built on one another. I honestly was unconscious about this as I was doing it. And then suddenly one day, I could have had a V8 kind of moment. And I saw, wait a minute, there's a flow here. There's a process flow. And then recently a student asked, she picked up on the same feel, you know, because she's been through this now with me a number of times. And she asked the question, is there an order of how we should do these things that is the best order to really get productive? And it just so happened I had the writer workflow figured out, and I sent her the diagram I'm going to show you. And she said, this was a thing of beauty, quote unquote. And I think it is. I think it is a thing of beauty, because it works and because it's manageable and you can wrap your arms and your head around it. And it's really cool stuff. So that's where this thing came from. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me just click over here to a little PDF file. It's called the writer workflow. And the idea behind this thing is that you do it in an organized, procedural kind of way that takes you through 10 core steps of story development that are all designed to put you in a position to actually write your story and start pages on a novel or a screenplay or a piece of creative nonfiction with a huge degree of confidence that you're going to be successful. This is about setting you up for writing success, not forcing you to arbitrarily jump through some hoops that I've just put up for you to have to jump through. No, these are all designed for productivity, and you're going to see in a second what I'm talking about. Some of you who are brand new and don't know anything about what I do or how I do it will discover. Hold on here, I'm having a little problem with my setting this up and making it clear. We don't want that. There we go. That's better. Those of you who have taken classes and courses and so on, or done consulting, you've been through some of these steps, so you'll know them as I talk to you about them. But those of you who are brand new to this and don't know anything about what I do or how I consult, you'll see what this is, and you'll see a lot of these things are incorporated in one form or another in my books Anatomy of a Premise Line and my book Rapid Story Development: How to Use the Enneagram-Story Connection, and other various tools that I have that I've created. But here's what I'm talking about the writer workflow. There is a flow, steps 1 through 10. If you do them, if you follow the order, if you do the worksheets associated with each step, you will compile a body of information and resources that will be a foundation for actually starting your pages, as I said, with a huge degree of confidence. A huge degree of confidence that what you're doing is going to really work and deliver. Okay? Is the thing called the whistles and bells test, which is a very, very simple test that I walk you through in the Anatomy of a Premise Line. So you see each of these steps references where in my books you can find them, or what tool specifically applies to the step so that you can use it. In this case, the whistles and bells test is an Anatomy of a Premise Line, and it's a very quick little test you can do on any story idea you have in the future, now or in the future, that when you apply this little test, it tells you very quickly whether or not what you have is going to have some legs. It's not going to tell you what the story is. It's not going to give you, all the green lights you want. But when you get the results that you want from this, what happens is you get this feeling like, oh yeah, there's something here that I can really work with. There's something worth putting my time into here, okay? If that's the case, then you move on to step 2. You do this whole process around like this thing called the moral component. It's this idea that everybody talks about. You've got to have a moral problem. You've got to have a moral flaw. Their characters have to be flawed in some way. They've got to be broken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No one ever tells you how to get one of these darn things. I do in this moral component tool. This is also covered in Anatomy of a Premise Line, but also in Rapid Story Development. And there's a free ebook on my Amazon page, Rapid Story Development ebook number 5. You can download it for free, that talks about all this stuff and walks you through with worksheets how to develop this moral component, which is the narrative engine of any middle of any story. It is a critical part of any narrative that has a middle, and everyone should. This is the thing that drives it. So a moral component, or this moral problem thing, is really, really important. Step 2 gets you there, okay? Then once you have that fairly handled, you move on to the 3rd step, which is to build your premise line. The premise line is the whole book has been written about this, called Anatomy of a Premise Line. And that book walks you through a very specific process for developing your story's premise. Because when a story's going to go south, when the wheels are going to come off the cart, they all do it at the same place in the development process, at the very idea itself. That's when things are going to go south, if they're going to go south. You have a bad premise. You have an unclear idea. The premise line tool, the premise line process teaches you how to take that test you just did, how to take that moral component you just created, and then use those to build a premise line, which is the entire structure of your story in 2 or 3 small sentences. Yes, it's really hard to get. Yes, it's like pulling teeth. But once you get it, that's the first big green light that you have in your development process, that you've got something that's going to be worth spending your time developing, because the structure will be there. You'll find the structure. You'll understand your protagonist. So this building process for the premise line is essential. When you decide to write a book or a screenplay, you're saying to yourself, ooh, I have a cool idea. I'm going to take the next year or 2 or more of my life and I'm going to write this sucker. Really? Why? Because you think you have a cool idea. How many cool ideas do you come up with in a week? Probably a lot. Well, why this one? Why not two of the other ones you've got? You're picking this one for a reason. There's a part of you that knows there's something more here. It's not just a cool idea. It's a story. Okay? The premise line validates that feeling in an empirical way that gives you a great deal of confidence to move on to the next step, which is to develop your log line, which every screenwriter needs, and frankly, every book writer needs for their query letters. But you can't really do a log line unless you have a premise line figured out or know the basic story of structure of your story. The logline process that I have, it's available online for free. You go to YouTube and you can find, under Reedsy, Redsy, I did a free webinar for them on using my logline machine tool. I'm going to be publishing that separately myself. But that's the next step here, is step 4, is now you develop your logline, which is part of your pitching process. But it's also a development tool because it helps you capture the high concept, helps you capture the hook, helps you come up with very, very short and concise tools that you can use to sell and pitch your script or your novel. Okay, everybody needs one of these things. There's a ton of stuff on the internet about how to write log lines. Most of it's crap. This is a very effective process. And I've used it with novelists and screenwriters, and it works really, really well. It's not the only one that works, but it's a really good one. But it's part of the writer workflow. It's step 4 in the writer workflow. Once you have your premise, once you've got your log line, now you write your short synopsis. You take your premise and you break it out into 5 or 6 pages of the A-line story. There's a whole chapter in Anatomy of a Premise Line that talks about how you approach the short synopsis or outlining phase. That's what this is all about. You take your A-line story, your main storyline, not all your subplots. It's only the main adventure involving your protagonist and the main antagonist. That's it. You take that premise line, and the 4 clauses that you use to build the premise line, you break each of those clauses out into 1 or 1.5 pages each into a narrative synopsis. And there's examples of what a synopsis is in the back of Anatomy of a Premise Line. But that's the next step. Now you've got a short synopsis. Now you move to step 6, up to the right-hand corner here. Now you start figuring out the middle of your story. This is a very complicated step because this is what I call the mushy middle. In rapid story development, how to use the Enneagram-Story Connection to become a master storyteller, Chapter 12 in that book is all about how the middle of any story works. It breaks out the 2 key machines that you need to be working in the middle of any story so that you avoid episodic writing and just bad writing in general. It helps you hold the center together so you avoid that terrible mushy middle. It teaches you how to do that. It's a very complicated chapter. Complicated only in the sense that there's lots of moving parts, and it takes a while to really master this. It's going to take about a month just to get through this one all by itself. But the other piece I'm going to fold into this at some point, it's not quite built in yet, is the Enneagram story stuff. The Enneagram is a whole other topic, a whole other set of videos, which I'm going to be doing here soon. But that is not just a character development tool, it's a story development tool. The Enneagram is a personality style system that defines 9 basic styles of being, thought, and action that all human beings do. It is one of the most powerful tools out there for creating characters. But what this whole book, Rapid Story Development, is about and illustrates, it's not just for character development. It's also for story development. The Enneagram points your nose toward major story structure beats that you have to accomplish and the best and most efficient ways of getting there using the Enneagram and the character-based aspects of the Enneagram. so that you've got not just great story action beats, but character beats that make sense of those story beats. Okay, it's very technical, but it's also very manageable and understandable as you slowly master it. But that's what this step 6 is all about, is how to get a solid middle for your story. Most people have good openings, good closings, but the middle part is a wasteland. This helps you avoid that. Then, after you have your middle figured out, you've got your basic premise and logline figured out, you've got a short synopsis. Now it's time to dive into subplots. Oh my gosh, this is literally a book I'm writing for my publisher on how to develop subplots. And this is a big hairy beast. And there is a special tool that I have called the subplot grid tool, the Storygeeks subplot grid tool, that helps you plan all your subplots. Every novel will have a bunch of subplots. You're going to have more than just the A-line story going. You're going to have lots of other storylines going. But you don't want them to be vignettes. You don't want them to be disconnected episodes. They're all subordinate to the mainline story. That's why they're called subplots. Subordinate to what? The mainline story. And they are an art in and of themselves. And this grid tool helps you understand how every subplot is structured and how they have to weave back in and have an impact on the A-line story. This grid is what you use to develop your key subplots. That's step 7. Once you have your subplots, now you can write a long synopsis. You take your short synopsis on step 8, and now you weave in all the subplots from the subplot grid tool, and you slowly figure out where those subplots are going to fold into that mainline story. How are you going to tell that larger narrative now? The short synopsis was 5 or 6 pages. The long synopsis is going to be 20 pages, maybe more, whatever you want. Anatomy of a Premise Line has a really great synopsis in there from a book from a friend of mine who's a New York Times bestselling author, Caroline Levitt. She allowed me to use the long synopsis from a book that she used to sell to Algonquin. And it's a great example of how to write a long synopsis that folds in the subplots really, really well. You use the subplot tool from step 7 into this step 8 step. And after you're all done with this, you have a narrative flow involving your A-line and all your subplots. It's not going to be right. It's not going to be perfect, but you will at least have a sense, a good working document of how you want these things to flow and interact, mainline and subplots. The next step after you have this done is step 9, which is your chapter grid, your chapter sheets, or your slugline outline. If you're writing a book, you want to now plan your chapters, and the Storygeeks outline design tool for novelists helps you figure out how you do that. You take your long synopsis and now you start pulling that apart. Using the outline design tool, you fill in sheets that help you figure out each chapter in the book based on the long synopsis. If you're writing a screenplay, you would do the slugline outline, which is for screenwriters, you know what I'm talking about. This is the outline. This is the chapter version of a screenplay, where you break everything out by your slug lines, and then you have like a 2 or 3 lines describing what's happening in each scene in that slug line outline. So those are the tools that you use in step 9 by incorporating and by pulling apart all your pieces, scene pieces that you have in the long synopsis in step 8. You now put those down into these separate sheets of paper that outline the chapters for the novel or are the slugs for your outline for the screenplay. Now, if you're happy with all of this, you could start writing pages with a high degree of confidence you're not going to get lost in the story woods. Now you've done the hard development work. All of this, by the way, takes about 5, 6, or 7 months of work. Maybe less, maybe a little more, but this whole process takes a while. But this is the development process, okay? Now, step 10 is sort of optional, I guess. A lot of screenwriters and novelists I know use this step. And what they do is they take those individual chapter pages that define what's going on in the chapter or the slug lines, and they put them onto index cards or some piece of paper big enough to hold it. And they stick it up on a wall. They color code all their subplots so that you can see where subplot A is and all the different scenes of subplot A, B, C, D, whatever. So you've got everything color coordinated. And then you stick that up on a board or on a wall. And for the next month or so, you just play with it. You move stuff around. It's called storyboarding. Okay? And this is a very old craft tool in screenwriting. All kinds of people use this. Lance Black uses it for his screenplays. He's a Oscar-winning screenwriter. I saw a video on YouTube where he had a huge marble kitchen table, and this is what he does with all of his scripts. He scenes it all out, gets them all on cards, sticks them on top of this big piece of marble, and just starts shuffling them around until he gets the right pacing and the right scene order, and then he's done. Then he starts writing the screenplay. Okay, you can do this with books the same way. Storyboard your book out. And when you color code everything in terms of subplots, you see where you're bunching up and you've got to break things up in the pacing. And you see where, now maybe you do want that in there. Maybe you do want that clump. Okay, well, you can make that creative choice. I'm going to leave it the way it is. Or that tells you that you need to start breaking things up a little bit to get a better pace. But it's a great visual tool to help you organize your scenes or chapters into the optimum order to tell the story. When you're all done with these 10 steps, now you're ready to write. Now, some people are going to write anyway, but that's okay. But the idea is, if I'm on any mission, it's to get people not to write pages until they're ready. Okay? So that's the writer workflow. Takes many months to do this, to do it right. And I think over time I have shown that these steps work because I've been using them with many writers in all different kinds of venues, in forms, novels, nonfiction, screenplays, graphic novels. You name it, I've pretty much done it. And I've used all these steps at one point or another with anyone who's been with me and working with my material for any period of time. So I know it's effective and I know it works. So how do you utilize this thing? Well, you can do it on your own. You got the steps. And you can access this poster I just showed you underneath in the description section. I've got a link to a download. You can download the PDF. It's free. And you can just buy these books, Anatomy of a Premise Line, Rapid Story Development, and kind of work through this on your own. But I'm going to have this designed at some point soon as a coaching program that you can participate in. And I don't know how much I'm going to charge yet. I don't know how exactly I'm going to structure it. But if you're interested, go to storygeeks.com, my website, and get on my mailing list and let me know. Then I'll keep you informed about these developments. And you can email me if you like at jeff@storygeeks.com and tell me that you're really interested in this. I'll just tell you to go to the website and get on the mailing list. Or you can leave comments below. Or you can click the little bell and subscribe here to the channel. And you'll get notified when I put new material up here about writer workflow. So that's kind of where this is at this point. I'll have more information at some point in the near future. This was really good for me because now I'm getting this out. I'm making it public. And so I've got to, deliver it, which is always good to have deadlines and a little pressure, right? I think this is a tremendous value to you as a writer or as a storyteller. I use this myself. And I've got a lot of folks now who are using it in one form or another, in one step or another, and finding a lot of value and productivity in their own development process. Okay, so that's it for now. Go to Storygeeks, get on the mailing list, leave a comment, click the bell, all that stuff. You know the routine. And I will get back with more information when I have it. But keep your ears peeled. And I'll see you on the channel. Thank you for your time.